And hello, everyone, and welcome back to Cyrus Webb Presents here on Amazon Live. I'm your host, Cyrus Webb. Glad you all could be with us. We definitely want to thank you guys for being with us on Amazon. If you guys are new to us, make sure you guys do hit that follow button. You'll see it here in this corner or down below. You also will see some of the books from our next guest. We're excited to welcome bestselling author Larry Tye to our broadcast today. I've had some great conversations with Larry on the radio side of our broadcast. It's his first time with us here on Amazon Live. And his newest book already has people talking. You guys can see it here. It is called The Jazzmen. And this is one of those books that I think you guys can really be able to appreciate. And I think the great thing about what Larry's done and he's done in his other work is really take us in the lives of these individuals. How Duke Ellington, Louis Armstrong, and Count Basie transformed America. We're going to talk to Larry not only about the researching of the book, but also what it was like for him to share these stories that many of us didn't know, to show the way that they shaped not only music, but also culture and the impact they continue to have today. We are simulcasting our broadcast today, so we do welcome those tuning in on Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube, X, and on Instagram. If you guys have any questions or comments for Larry, make sure you guys put those in the comment section for us. Larry, thank you so much for the time today. Really appreciate it.
I'm a low-tech guy and love being in your high-tech world and back with you again, Cyrus.
Well, look, the pleasure is definitely all mine. It's hard to believe you and I first connected with the book Satchel. And I mean, I think even going back there, one thing you've always done, Larry, that I really appreciate is not only take us into historical figures that have made an impact, but also really been able to personalize them and show their connection with the rest of us. What has that been like for you in your career to be able to do that from book to book?
So that is a challenge in any storyteller, whatever the medium, in trying to tell their story. My book is essentially a history of Jim Crow America, but told through the incredibly toe-tapping, vibrant personalities of Duke Ellington, Louis Armstrong, and Count Basie. And unless you can figure out a way to make the story personal and moving, nobody's going to sit down and read the bigger story that you're trying to tell.
So, out of the other books that you've done, I mentioned Satchel, of course. We've had other conversations, and we actually have in the carousel there the Bobby Kennedy book. You and I discussed that on the radio show as well. Demagogue, another great book. So, on the Amazon side, you guys will see those either here on the side here or down below. Some of the other books that Larry has written that we've discussed. What is it that made you want to be able to research and to write The Jazzmen?
So if I could take you back to an even earlier book that I wrote, and it was a book on the black men who worked on the railroad starting at the end of the Civil War. They were called Pullman Porters, and they were an extraordinary group of men. Many of them were ex-slaves who worked on George Pullman sleeping cars. They were the only black men from the end of the Civil War until the 1960s who earned that kind of money and who got to travel the country. And they told me when I got done writing about them that someday I had to write two other books. One was on their favorite athlete that they carried on the trains, and that was an incredible baseball pitcher named Satchel Paige, and you and I talked about that book. And the other was on their three overall favorite passengers, three guys named Duke, the Count, and Louis. And the reason the Porters cared about these guys and got to know them was in the days of Jim Crow segregated America, when you were even famous guys like Ellington, Armstrong, and Basie, and you traveled into Jim Crow territory, into segregated territory, at the end of your concert, if you picked the wrong restaurant to go into or the wrong hotel to try to book a room, it could be a situation where you would get beat up, or you might even end up at the end of a lynching noose. So what they did was, the way to stay safe was to hire a private Pullman sleeping car. And when you were doing your performance, let's say in Atlanta, you would pull the car off to the sidetrack. And at the end of your concert at night, you would go back to the Pullman sleeping car, knowing that you had a great meal waiting for you, knowing that you had a comfortable bed waiting. And in return, what these musicians did for their Pullman Porter caretakers was at midnight, they would have a jam session in the middle of this closed capsule of the sleeping car. And I don't know about you, Cyrus, but if I could go back to any moment in our past, I'd like to be out there for a midnight jam session where it was just me and the Ellington band.
Yeah. Love that. And it's such a great story. And I think the book you're talking about, Larry, you can correct me on this. I think that we have it in the carousel there, Rising from the Rails.
It is indeed Rising from the Rails,
Okay.
and the subtitle tells the story. It is Rising from the Rails, Pullman Porters and the Making of the Black Middle Class. And I discovered in doing my research that just about everybody prominent in Black America had an uncle or a cousin or a grandfather who had been a Pullman porter and who had helped give them a start in life.
Love that. I want to say hello to you guys coming in on the Instagram side. Miss Merritt Watson, hello to you. WJIL Gospel, good to be able to see you. Jesus Black Man 23, thank you so much for being with us. Over on the IG side, Cindy Prairie Dodgers, good to be seeing you from Canada, joining us on IG. Nahid joining us from the West Coast. We're joined by bestselling author Larry Tye today. He's celebrating his book. It's already a #1 new release here on Amazon. You guys see here the Jazzmen. We're going to be reminding you how you can be able to get it for yourself too. How Duke Ellington, Louis Armstrong, and Count Basie transformed America. For those not joining us on Amazon, you will find a link that will bring you over to Amazon to be able to get the book, and I'll remind you of that as well. Larry, as you've done in your other books, you not only give us the notable individuals, but in the Jazzmen, I have to admit, I found backstories to these three individuals that I did not know. I mean, so you really peel back the layers, let us see what they went through in their personal lives, what they had to deal with their own physical, how can I say this, limitations at times. I'll put it that way. But also just their engaging with people. What was that like for you to get to know them on a more intimate level?
There had been hundreds of books literally written about these guys' music, and I didn't have faith that I was going to be able to come along and say something that hadn't been said before about their music. I wanted to understand what their lives were like off their bandstands. And I really wanted to understand why Martin Luther King said that these guys set the table for his civil rights revolution. And it was extraordinary to me. I learned that they were men, all three of them, deep men of faith who believed in God, who prayed before every meal, and in Duke Ellington's case, who read the Bible 3 times, cover to cover, he said. But I also learned that they broke their fair number of commandments as well. When they were on the road, they did what we would have called in that era womenizing, that they were that they drank. They, in Louis Armstrong's case, he smoked marijuana just about every morning and evening of his life. So they did things that were upstanding. They did things that we might be more critical of. But in the end, these three men who started out as my heroes were even bigger heroes because I saw them as flesh and blood people with weaknesses the way they all do. So the short answer to your question is, it was fascinating to be able to peel back the layers and look beyond the legend and the myth to who they really were.
Love that. Manswell, hello to you. Going to be able to see you over on the Facebook side there. To the point you were just making, Larry, I also think stood out to me is very aware, it seems like, and you can elaborate on this if you'd like to, that this was bigger than just them. That they were the individuals that were being seen, but that when it came to their presentation, when they came to their personas, they realized that this was bigger for them. What was that like for you to see and to realize the weight that they realized that they had in not only performing but also in transforming the world?
So it was extraordinary to see that. It was extraordinary to see that not only were they amazingly popular in America, which I knew, there was a point at which it was said for actually a long period of time that the two most recognizable figures from America to the rest of the world were Mickey Mouse and Louis Armstrong. And I'm not sure it was in that order. And they were people who everywhere they went in the world, they drew thousands, if not tens of thousands of people to their concerts. They were symbols of what America was at its best. This was, Europe gave us classical music, and Latin America gave us all kinds of Latin American musical forms. But the most all-American music there was jazz, and these three were the representatives of it.
Yeah. I want to say hello to on the IG side. You guys are really piling in over on that side. Wendy, hello to you. Good to be able to see you. Texas Boy 0308, hello to you. Dewan, hello to you on the IG side as well. See you guys over on YouTube as well. So we are interactive today, as I mentioned. We are primarily on Amazon. I see some of you guys already getting your copy of the new book, The Jazzmen. There are some other great books here as well. The book that Larry referenced earlier, I have not read, Rising from the Rails, yet. I say yet, Larry, but I definitely will put it on my list. But the Bobby Kennedy book is a great book. Demagogue, I've read that one and discussed it with Larry, as well as Satchel. That was my introduction to Larry as well. So definitely, this is a great book to add to that collection. To the same vein you were just talking about, Larry, I want to ask you about something else, and that is, thinking about the period of time they were in. I was talking about the Jazzmen themselves and realizing their impact. It seemed like also something that's a great parallel for today is that music seems to be that connection that brings people together. It kind of, it's able to heal divides in a way that very few things can. We even could see that in some ways when it came to the music, the essence of the music that these three individuals done. Talk to us about that. What it was like for you also as a fan to realize that yes, people were coming to them for music, but it was more than music. It was really an escape and a connection.
Was and bringing people together. There's nothing more important in our divided world today than bringing people together, and these three guys did it. Duke Ellington, for instance, was acclaimed in the White House of Richard Nixon, but also in the White House of Jack Kennedy. All of them, we were never quite sure what political party they were part of, but they were party to a uniting force in America. What better way? There were white racist men who would never have let a black come across their doorstep, who wooed their wannabe wives with the music of Duke Ellington or Louis Armstrong. There were white women who might have moved to the other side of the street if they saw a black man coming towards them, but in the privacy of their own living rooms, they kicked off their shoes and they tapped their toes to the music of Count Basie. They were a force for uniting people racially, politically. They were all about American art form of jazz and making that a form that could bring people together, and it did. And I'd like to make an offer that I might regret to your various audiences. You talked about people, some of them were buying the book. If people would like the thing that everybody wants in a book, and you can't do if you're dealing with a virtual audience, is an autograph. If people email me, if they buy the book and they want an autograph to sign to somebody for Father's Day or Mother's Day or any occasion, shoot me an email and I will send you an autograph plate with a signature to whomever you tell me. And if I can give my email, is that all right, Cyrus? And
Sure,
say,
yeah, sure. That's fine. That's fine.
so my email is simply my name, which is Larry, T as in Thomas, Y-E, Larry Tye as one word at gmail.com. Shoot me an email and just tell me a couple things. Who do you want the book signed to? And what address should I send this book plate? And I'd love to personalize it because I think this is a story that we ought to get out there, and that giving it as a gift is the least controversial gift you could ever give. It's about this American art form of jazz. It's about uniting people. And it's about the idea that social change doesn't happen in a vacuum. It happens because people like Ellington, Armstrong, and Basie are out there saying, we can make good things happen.
So true. I'll talk around this, Larry, because I don't want to spoil it, and you can be as vague or detailed as you would like. Oh, hello to you, Sugar Ray. Good to see you over on the Instagram side. Michael Martin, hello to you. Good to see you as well. We're speaking with best-selling author Larry Tye today. He's the author of the new best-selling book on Amazon, The Jazzmen: How Duke Ellington, Louis Armstrong, and Count Basie Transformed America. And he just made a great offer to be able to do personalized plates as well for those who purchased the book too. So you can definitely catch the replay on that. But I want to ask you about something again that struck me, and that is about the complications of the personal lives of these three men and how I think a lot of people had no idea what they were dealing with, right? But how even for them, music, we talked about earlier how people came to them for an escape. What was it like for you to dive into, Larry, how music was in many ways an escape for them too?
So it was indeed an escape. Let's start with Louis Armstrong. This is a guy who grew up in a neighborhood of Jim Crow New Orleans that was so poor that it was known as the battlefield. And that was a sense of what he had to contend with when he was growing up. And in fact, he used music as an escape during the 18 months he spent in a juvenile detention center called the it was called the Waifs Home for Negro Boys. And it was that gives a sense of sort of the world that it was that he was going into. And most people would have been beaten down by that. Louis Armstrong discovered that he could play the horn. It was initially a cornet, then it became a trumpet, and he played it so well that he essentially said, I gave up 18 months of freedom in my life to learn something that gave me a leg up for the rest of my life. And he used his music as an escape from his poverty in New Orleans. Duke Ellington grew up in a more ennobled and a wealthier surrounding in middle-class Black Washington, D.C. It was a border community. It had some Jim Crow laws, but a lot more freedoms. The largest and arguably the most educated Black community in America, and yet he still wanted an escape. He hung out a lot of the time in pool halls. He made a lot of money by painting signs and trying other things. But the one thing that he did the best that he realized was plunk those piano chords and lead a band. And that was what let him escape to New York. And the third one of our trio was Count Basie. And he grew up in a place called Red Bank, New Jersey, not far from New York. And from the time that he was old enough to start dreaming, his dream was to get the heck out of Red Bank. And he initially thought about doing that by joining the circus. And again, he discovered that it was a different kind of skill that he had, the skill of playing the piano, that let him escape first to the suburbs and then to New York City, where he literally learned at the feet of the famous Fats Waller.
Yeah, three remarkable individuals. Larry, you spend so much time, and it's very obvious, and I could tell even from the early reviews. And I want to thank Galeon to Public Relations for helping me get an early copy of the book. But one thing I can tell people appreciate with you is that you don't just cover individuals. You really take us into the experience, and you make them feel a part of us. So I want to ask you, as someone who spent so much time researching and writing this book, what were some of the key takeaways for you that really impressed you, that stayed with you?
So the key takeaway was that when they were playing their music, and they were all three insisting, we're not out there to be activists, judge us by what we do as musicians. Mm-hmm. Even as they were doing it, and even as they were opening America's ears and souls to the magnificence of their tunes, they were explicitly involved with pressing for equal rights. Louis Armstrong called out President Eisenhower for failing to send federal troops to protect the young Black students who were integrating Central High School in Little Rock, Arkansas, the most controversial civil rights activity of the 1950s. And it was Louis Armstrong, not big civil rights leaders, who I think got President Eisenhower to send in the troops to protect the kids. It was Duke Ellington who was so convinced when he went to Baltimore by students who were staging a sit-in to try to integrate a diner in Baltimore that Duke Ellington joined him and made headlines for doing it. And it was Count Basie whose wife was involved with Martin Luther King and every big civil rights leader of the era. And in 1945, long before anybody dreamed of doing this, Count Basie said, if you want me and my band to perform in your nightclub, you've got to allow Blacks and whites to come and listen to me. And that was something radical, and it worked. And they could only do this because they were such brilliant musicians, but they used their celebrity to help everybody else get rights that they didn't have then.
Wow. Really making it so much bigger than them. And also, I think, bigger than the music. And I think, too, in just what you shared there, Larry, shows that people understand the power of music and those who give us music, too, because for them to use their platforms that way says so much. Great conversation with you, Larry. I'm so glad we got a chance to see you this time and spend some time with you discussing the brand new bestseller. Again, everyone, Larry Tye is our guest. The new book you guys see there, The Jazzmen, How Duke Ellington, Louis Armstrong, and Count Basie Transformed America. Available right here on Amazon. You guys can get it both the hardcover as well as the Kindle edition. You guys can see there in the carousel. And the other books by Larry, you guys can see them there as well. Larry, you have a great website as well. Would you mind sharing that with our audience?
So again, the website is just my name, LarryTye.com.
All right, and we'll make sure that we link that up for them too. Larry, thank you again for spending the time with us, and looking forward to speaking with you again.
Great to be with you, Cyrus. Thank you.
You're more than welcome. And we thank your audience for tuning in to another great segment of Cyrus Webb Presents. Until next time, I'm your host, Cyrus Webb, saying, as always, enjoy your day, enjoy your life, enjoy your world. We'll see you next time. Take care.